Somewhere in what is now Indonesia, roughly 70,000 years ago, the rain started and did not stop for 11 weeks. Not drizzle. 11 weeks of monsoon so heavy it turned forest floors into lakes while you watched. The kind of rain that makes sound irrelevant. You cannot hear anything over it, which means you also cannot hear what is moving toward you through it. A group of maybe 30 people huddled under a rock shelf. They had fire. Then the rain found the fire. And when the last ember died, three things happened at once. The cold came first. Water pulls heat from a human body roughly 25 times faster than air alone. A soaked person on a wet tropical night is not uncomfortable. They are burning through their core temperature at a rate the body cannot compensate for. Hands stop cooperating. Thinking gets slow and strange. Children go quiet in ways that mean something specific and terrible. The predators notice second. Big cats do not stop hunting in a storm. They prefer it. Rain drowns the sound of their approach and washes their scent off the ground. The only thing holding the darkness back had been the fire. The fire was gone. The eyes at the edge of the rock shelf moved closer. The food problem arrived third, and this is the one almost no one thinks about. These people could not cook. No new fire meant every piece of meat was raw, every root barely digestible, every calorie their bodies desperately needed locked behind a door they had no key for. Three simultaneous threats. No technology that could address any of them. And yet, based on the archaeological record of human survival through this period, their descendants made it through. You are one of those descendants. Which means they did something. One thing specifically, something so obvious that when researchers first documented it in traditional communities still using it today, it almost did not get written up. Because it required no tools, no preparation, no skill that had to be learned. It just required other people, used in one specific way. Here is what they did, and why it turned out to be one of the most effective survival systems our species ever developed. The behavior has a name in modern thermal biology, grouped thermoregulation. But that phrase hides what it actually looked like, so set it aside. What it looked like was everyone pressed together and staying there. Not sitting near each other, not sharing a blanket loosely, physically compressed, children at the center, largest bodies on the outside, absorbing the cold. The arrangement was not comfortable. Nobody chose it for comfort. A resting human body generates roughly 80 watts of heat continuously, not much alone. But researchers studying cold weather survival physiology have found that 10 bodies in close contact produce a shared thermal envelope that significantly outperforms what any individual can maintain in isolation. Not because the total heat changes, but because the system stops losing it. The bodies on the outside buffer the ones inside. The rock above reflects warmth downward. The rain hits the perimeter and loses. What is significant is that this works even when fire does not. A fire in a monsoon is fragile. Hungry for dry fuel, the rain is simultaneously destroying, exposed to every gust that drives water sideways through the dark. Evidence from ethnographic studies of traditional hunter-gatherer communities suggests that body heat management through group proximity was likely a primary survival strategy during wet seasons, not a backup to fire, but a parallel system that operated independently of it. But here is the part that researchers find genuinely interesting. The physical arrangement was not the hard part. The hard part was maintaining it across weeks. Because prolonged rain does something specific to human group psychology. By the second week of a monsoon, the proximity that felt warm on night one begins to feel suffocating. Irritability rises. Small frictions that would dissolve in normal conditions harden into genuine fractures. The instinct to create space, away from the smell of wet bodies, away from the noise of other people's discomfort, becomes almost irresistible. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm, who spent decades studying social structures in traditional hunter-gatherer communities, documented that groups with stronger collective behavioral norms during environmental hardship showed measurably better survival outcomes than groups operating on individual decision-making alone. Not because collective rules are always optimal in any specific situation, but because they prevented the dispersal that killed people when the rain would not stop. The trick was not just bodies together. The trick was the social architecture that kept bodies together when being together had stopped feeling good. And the archaeological record appears to reflect this directly. At Pinnacle Point in South Africa, researchers have found evidence of humans returning to the same enclosed coastal rock shelters across thousands of years of repeated occupation. The shelters are not large. The evidence is not of individuals finding convenient refuge. It is consistent with groups, across generations, understanding that a specific enclosed space plus a specific number of bodies equaled survival through the wet season. At Blombos Cave, also in South Africa, the material record includes shell beads and ochre used for decoration, objects that only carry meaning in a social context, alongside hearths surrounded by debris consistent with multiple people eating together. The evidence suggests, across multiple sites and multiple time periods, that the humans who survived wet seasons were overwhelmingly living and sheltering in groups rather than in isolation. The knowledge of how to hold a group together through months of rain was not written anywhere. It did not need to be. Every generation that came out the other side of the wet season demonstrated it to the next, and every generation that dispersed when the pressure got bad enough is not represented in the record at all. Now here is the piece that should sit with you after the video ends. You still do this when you are genuinely cold, not slightly chilly, but the kind of cold that makes your body feel urgent. Your instinct is not to solve it alone. Something in you looks for another person. You pull a blanket over two bodies instead of one. You move toward the crowd. You find a reason not to be alone that has nothing to do with loneliness in any emotional sense. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA has documented that the neural circuitry processing physical cold and the circuitry processing social isolation overlap in the human brain to a degree that is unlikely to be coincidental. The same regions that flag dangerous temperature loss also flag the absence of other people as a threat. Your brain does not cleanly distinguish between being cold alone and simply being alone. Both register in the same general category of emergency, because for hundreds of thousands of wet seasons, they were the same emergency. Researchers studying chronic loneliness describe its physiological profile in terms that echo cold stress precisely: elevated cortisol, suppressed immune function, disrupted sleep, a body behaving as though it is exposed even when the room temperature is fine, as though some part of the system is still waiting for the group to close back around it. That waiting is not a malfunction. It is the oldest survival system your species ever developed, still running, still scanning, still checking whether everyone is close enough. Back to that rock shelf. 11 weeks of rain, fire gone, eyes in the dark, and 30 people doing the one thing that is going to work. Staying together, pressed close in a space that is too small, through nights that feel too long, for weeks that do not seem to end. Not because it is comfortable, because somewhere in the accumulated experience of every generation before them, the lesson had been passed forward in the most direct possible way. The ones who dispersed are not in this story. The trick is not impressive to look at. There is no artifact to excavate, no tool to admire, just the evidence of groups returning to the same shelters across thousands of years, and the negative space of the ones who did not. Close together, in the rain, waiting for the sky to clear, the same way something in you still wants to be. On a cold night, when the dark feels large, reaching, almost without deciding to, for the nearest warm human being. That is the stupid trick. It kept everyone alive. It is still keeping you alive. You just forgot. That is what it was for.